Should make sure this is picking up the sound, the other things. Should be able to hear like a forest sound. I don't know if it's actually picking it up or not. Who knows? Okay. Should be there. As usual, I'll wait for people to come in and pop out all this stuff. So pop out the chat. It's ridiculous, really. Right. Okay. I think I'm there. About. Immediately someone's come in with a spicy question. Hang on, I'm just sorting out. This always takes so long to get, so I can kind of see everything. Right, I can see everything now. You should be able to hear me and faint forest sounds. Can someone just confirm that the audio is all right, and then we'll be good to go. I'm hoping everyone can actually. Audio's good. Okay. Well, I guess this will be the point where I cut it when I upload it elsewhere. Yeah. Welcome everyone to another Q&A. It's been a little while. I think it's been like 4 months. I have some questions that are from Patreon and some that are from Twitter. Which I will read, but as per usual, I will focus on the ones in the chat first, so I don't lose them. But feel free to ask away anything you want to ask me or about the podcast. The podcast is, going from. I guess I'll open with this. The podcast is going from strength to strength. Growing, slow and steady. It's the audience has always remained mature, which is very nice. And yeah, it just keeps getting bigger, and I always get good feedback, so I'm happy about that. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I could be promoting. I guess I could say that head over to Gallowglass Books, because they've been kind enough to send me their, for no reason, not even for a review, they've been kind enough to send me some review copies or just copies of their books. From the recent episode with on Giordano Bruno, they're making these beautiful editions. So head over to Gallowglass Books. There's no affiliation there. I just want to support them. Also head over to First to Knock. You'll know from some episodes from a while ago, First to Knock publishers, small publisher that is producing really good niche stuff. And one publisher that I should always shout out, because they've connected me to so many people, and I've also published my own book, is Aeon. So make sure to check out Aeon Books, like Aeon Publishers, AEON. They are like a consistent touchstone for me for interviews and inspiration. There's also Chiron or Chiron Books, who are kind of new up and coming Jungian publisher that are doing really great stuff, and giving authors a lot of free reign. So check out all those. But someone, AK in the chat, has opened with a fairly, well, it's not really a sensitive question because I think it's broader than you ask. But anyway, and I get asked this more than you'd think. I think because of my middle of the, well, my, I don't know, however you want to define. Anyway, the question is, any tips on cutting through the noise of modern political discourse? Migrants, question mark. Inflation, question mark. So, it's a very, it is a sensitive topic for a lot of people. And it wouldn't, one way I would cut through it is that, is to think about the fact that if this is the sensitive topic now, then what was the sensitive topic a year ago or 2 years ago or 4 years ago or 10 years ago? And did the conclusion of that sensitive topic, if you can remember what side or in what way you supported it, did that lead to any sufficient change in your life? If the answer is no, which it more than likely is, and even if the answer is yes, I still think this is important, is that, to quote Darren Allen, the news is a rarefied form of pornography. So either way, whether or not you're right-wing and getting flustered and getting a little emotional, possibly even physical sort of high from too many immigrants coming in, or if you're left-wing and you're getting frustrated at the increase of this thing, either way, the news as it's engaged with is basically porn. You click on it and you read things in a sort of the headline and the encapsulated shots, which are sculpted down by the ad men and the news sites and the media, are there to give the equivalent of sort of an intellectual or sovereign orgasm where you feel once again in control. I would say that on these, to cut through the noise of it is to try be true to the situation, and to be true to the situation is to be true to basically what's immediate for you. And if it's something you feel either way so passionate about that it's getting you emotional, and you truly feel that way, then I guess you'd go engage in it if you wanted to. But if you're not, and your life is actually fine, which if you step back from, if you literally just turn off the news and live your life, I'd assume, if you're the kind of person watching or listening to my podcast, that your life is very comfortable and fine, and you have a lot to be grateful for, and that really what a lot of engagement with the news is, especially these kind of polarizing stories where it's very easy to not just take a side but to emphasize that you are right and someone else is wrong, is that it doesn't really have anything to do with your life, and what it allows is you become very comfortable in your life, and it allows you then to have a bit of excitement. It's the equivalent of like an upcoming party. You'll notice this, the way that a lot of this is now engaged with is like live streams of protests or whatever, people sort of vicariously engaging with them the way they would, I don't know, a TV show like Baby Reindeer, which was basically vicariously living through another man's trauma for entertainment. It's much the same way. And I think really, if you are to take universal laws like something like the fall, like as in I'm talking about the Edenic fall, or something like that, like there is some inconsistency in man and woman that just doesn't quite work out in terms of there being this potentiality for suffering, for pain, for hurt, for cruelty, then it doesn't matter what gets fixed in temporality, in the everyday thing we call reality. It doesn't matter if to take the sensitive topic, it doesn't matter if the migrant crisis gets fixed. It doesn't matter if we go to Mars, because there will always be more problems to find. And a lot of people think that's a defeatist or avoidant way. But again, I'm not I'm clearly not that fussed by it because I'm not engaged in the sense of doing anything. So to cut through it, the simple answer is to turn off the news and the media and be true to your immediate situation. Because anything outside of that tends to be pornography. It tends to be trying to get a bit of excitement, something that you can latch onto and say, well, I'm here, they're there. And in a certain sense, so many of these crises, and I'm in agreement with Todd McGowan on this, I think, is that so many of these crises almost either don't sort of unconsciously don't want to be fixed, or actually can't be fixed for the fact that so many people existing need a dualism, need a friction to basically feel alive. And politics especially needs a friction to maintain. The government consistently needs multiple frictions to maintain its legitimacy. So, Todd McGowan's point is that Trump can never build the wall because once he has, you no longer have this sort of archetypal friction around Trump that allows for the support. And all of politics is like that, consistently needing something like that. So to cut through it is to live your life, is to live simply, and to accept, is to... People will get, in short, and this is probably the only answer to this question, in short, people will get mad, get emotional, to the point of red-fisted, bright red anger. They will derail their life for some short-term, contemporaneous political thing that doesn't care about them. And all the while, their marriage is falling off a cliff. Their kids hate them, they hate their job, or whatever it might be, something very immediate to them that could be changed isn't changed. And it's often an avoidance. Not always. And I'm sure there's legitimate concerns for everyone involved. Sound like very much like a middle of the road man, but it's just not that form. I think that form of politics is one and the same. That basically all gravitates around a single value, which I've been writing about this recently. So many of these crises, or whatever it might be, the issue for me with that political talk is that it all gravitates around a single value, which is money, under the form of GDP. So none of these things are spoken about in terms of, familial values, beauty, love, or any other value, really. Anything, either way, is justified by the economy, by economic talk, by whether or not a certain amount of people here will raise GDP or a certain amount of people there will lower GDP. The entire value system of whether or not a country or a people or a population or an individual, in many cases, is doing well, is whether or not they're, have we seen sufficient growth this year? And they mean economic growth. What's the rate of inflation? What's the average mortgage rate? What's the bank saying? We don't hear about anything else. We don't hear about how many trees have been planted, or what species of butterfly may be coming back, or how the seas are doing, or whether or not people see beauty every day. And people say, well, this is pretentious and this is rubbish. But the point is that whole form of politics is exactly the same and rests on a foundation of money and GDP. It's the reason for everything is just money. And there's nothing there to engage with if you're not interested, because the conclusion either way, the conclusion for the right, the conclusion for the left, the conclusion for, if you want to call yourself a centrist, conclusion for the conservatives, the neoconservatives, whoever, is an increase in GDP. And I don't have much to say there because I'm not interested in that as a value. Anyway, that's a long answer for the first question. How far am I into building an Orgone accumulator? Asks Harry. So I have an Orgone pillow, which I have an Orgone pillow which works, and occasionally will use it on certain parts of my body, often the stomach, or the back of my neck. It's been helping with occipital neuralgia. This is not medical advice. As for the actual Orgone accumulator, which would be one that you would get into, seemingly going off the plans. This is from James DeMayo. you need to have an orgone accumulator in a room with a fair amount of space. So the only way I'd be able to do that is because I live in a fairly small apartment, and I don't want to move anywhere bigger, because I just don't need. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment, and one of the bedrooms I don't use, right? The only way I can do that is clear out my lounge and just have an orgone accumulator right in the middle of the lounge, which would look ridiculous. The other way I could do it is kind of tuck it in a cupboard, but it needs air around it. So I'm kind of thinking of and you also can't have it in a room. So I couldn't have it in this room, which does have a bit of space, because it can't be near PCs. There's also like a lot of these plans were drawn up. Reich's plans were drawn up. I would say 50s or 60s. I think I might be wrong on that one. De Meo's plans, I would assume 80s or 90s, and there's a lot of variables with regard to what the insulation is in the walls, but also things like Wi-Fi, 4G, 5G, and I'm not going on conspiracy here, but just in terms of orgone accumulators, like all these things are key hazards that could actually, going by, this actually happened to Reich in the Orgone experiments, a book he never republished, is they will invert the thing and make you really sick. So that hasn't happened with the orgone pillow. When I had the orgone blanket, I left it on too long, and I did feel very nauseous for a long time. So there's something there. Again, if you're watching this, you don't know that I have an interest in Reich or orgones, listen to my chat with James Strick, or read James Strick's book, which will sort of demystify and make you realise the truth is there. There is some truth there, but just it's not as ridiculous as most people made out. Am I subscribed to any journals or magazines? Many people know this from people who also do stuff like I do on a weekly basis, like creating a podcast, creating a magazine. Is one thing you quickly find is you really don't have much time to read certain things, like subscription type things, or especially podcasts. I do not have time to listen to podcasts. It's a lot of, I have people who I only put out 1 or 2 things a week, and people will say they struggle to keep up. So it's a lot. I subscribe to Expressive Egg, which is Darren Allen's. I subscribe to the Barry Long podcast on Spotify, which is just the old recordings of Barry Long, which they're slowly putting out there. I will occasionally listen to Jason Horsley's podcast. But there isn't anything too consistent. The only one I'm consistently read is Expressive Egg, which is Darren Allen's, who is releasing a new book soon, The Book of Love, which I'm going to be reviewing. So a bit of promo there for Darren as well. Someone said, "Don't build orgone accumulators. You will end up in hell with Reich, and we will be persecuted by Marquis de Sade." I'm going to assume that's either, I don't know, I'm not going to assume who that is, but I think I might know who that is. The novel Morwen by John Cooper Powys has Marquis de Sade as a guide of hell. Wilhelm Reich in hell. Even though this whole idea of Reich being sort of the Antichrist and going to hell. If you read, and this is the best place for this is Baudelaire's book on Reich. There he does an outline of what Reichian, like the actual Reichian sexual revolution looks like. And nowadays, it's actually very conservative. It's really conservative. So the sexual revolution that we think came about because of Reich is actually the antithesis of what the Reichian sexual revolution would have looked like. So Reich in Hell, I don't think so. I haven't read Wilhelm Reich in Hell by Anton Wilson. It's one of the ones I haven't watched. Someone is in here talking about like patriotic action. I'm not affiliated with that, and I want nothing to do it. Someone says, "I love my podcast. Thank you very much." M says, "Are you mad at people (in brackets me) that have listened to you for years but have never supported you with money?" No, I could make a coy joke and say that I am. No, I'm not. And you know what? I'll give you some sort of insight from the other side of this, that there's really no correlation. And most people I've spoken to, unless they're real mercenaries about it, which it's not in my character to be, there isn't there isn't a correlation between how many times I say I have a Patreon, please subscribe, or links for my Patreon in the description below. The reason I only say it once an episode is the times that I've tried more to get subscribers, just isn't a correlation between that. And I think you just get the money you need, really. I don't, So am I angry? No, I just want people to enjoy it. There would be a point where, like nowadays, there would be a point where if the money got to a certain point, I think I can't put, because I do put a lot of time into it. A lot of, I don't have much free time with this and the other job. So no, I'm not annoyed. The reason I started is for people to find and have accessibility to overlooked thinkers, and that's all I really wanted people to find. So I hope they have. I don't have to give me any money, but if you are listening and you have a lot of money, send it to me. Right now. No, not at all. Someone says no children, easy to live in a bubble. I think they did. I've had a few people on here say that you can't really talk about anything if you haven't got kids. Sure, I don't. I never know what to reply to that. My only thing with not having children is, and it took me years to have this realization, I think, is that. And I honestly think this might be Darwinian or evolutionary, because there's a lot of talk. I mean, this is a good segue into like birth rates. There's a lot of talk about, the UK's birth rate is 1.44. South Korea's is like 1.01 or 0.8. So if you do the math on the UK birth rate, which I did recently, a birth rate of 1.44, we're currently at 70 million people, roughly, in the UK, with a birth rate of 1.44, which is what it is at the moment, and it's going down. In 90 years, which is roughly 3 generations, we'll be at 20 million people. South Korea's is way worse. And the thing to know about this is, in the whole history, in the entirety of human history, no nation has ever reversed a birth rate. They've never made the birth rate suddenly come back. And we also know that there is a correlation between higher income and lower birth rate. And we also know there is no incentive, as we can see in Hungary and other nations, that works. And this is really just Spenglerian history playing out. And so the point with someone saying you have no children is, I think for a lot of people these days, when I was young at least, some people, they just had this thing in them that was like, they're going to have kids, and they could think about it and they could see a future where they're running around with children. I just never had that. And then when I think about having children, there's nothing there in my mind. Unlike other things that I might think about that I want in the future, not that I think about that much, just not there. It just isn't, it's just not a thing. So yeah, but birth rates will keep going down and there'll be less people around, and that's fine. So, Adam James Pollock, another person, I recommended a lot of other people at the start of the podcast. Another person whose work I admire, who does cookbooks and cooking guides, is Adam James Pollock, who is an online friend of mine from Ireland, who I hope to visit one day and go to the Titanic Museum with. But if you check him out, Adam James Pollock, and he's written some really great cookbooks. And he's got a lot of really good cooking stuff online. Check him out. But he asks, how does the Titanic submersible implosion add to your canon of ideas on the Titanic as emblematic of Western declinism? The submersible implosion, in a sense, I'm a big fan of the Titanic, and the photo of the submersible with a ratchet strap round it is a really haunting image in the bottom of the ocean. Ironically, taken by a submersible that can survive down there. I mean, it was complete ignorance. People like James Cameron, I believe, spoke to that guy and said, look, like, this isn't going to work. And there is something extremely tragic about this very modern artifact, which is the submersible now resting kind of next to the beautiful shell that is the Titanic. I mean, it is kind of the extremity of late civilization voyeurism, where it's the equivalent of extreme sports for cultural voyeurs, you know, with extreme sports. And with anything that like sort of pornographic, anything that's meant to, you know, like be like you get the equivalent of an orgasm, whether it's literal porn, food, like contemporary food culture, even dogs, or extreme sports. It only really has one direction, which is more intense, more flavour, cuter dog, smaller dog. Dogs seem to be just getting smaller and smaller. You know, like furrier spaniel, or extreme sports like longer bungee, faster car, etc. Whatever it is. And I think the Titanic is this submersible thing. It's the same thing with the Titanic. Like we want to go deeper, we want to get closer, but there's not. It's very much a case of nothing new under the sun. And again, in a Spenglerian sense, once the ideas have hit their peak, like their sort of mortal peak, which we're long past, everyone's noticing this. Everyone says, like, how come Hollywood can't come up with new ideas? Why is there no new, like, great novelists? We're past, you know, we've used up the forms of our Spenglerian moment, and we're now just reusing them as best we can. And usually that just means that it becomes very transparent that they are being reused. And so with the Titanic, I mean, it's just the same thing again. So it isn't the case of like, oh, we can't come up with new ideas. There just isn't, not until the next cycle, there isn't any new ideas. That's not anything to get down about. But you end up really like the equivalent of the submersible, or there was a book in the 70s of sociology of the only way to live now is to go into a supermarket. You can't really experience the supermarket, but you can watch it like an anthropologist. That's really, really all we can do now, apparently. So yeah, but there is a great book, The Sinking of the Titanic and the End of the Edwardian Era is a fantastic book on that kind of thing. My recent post about relationships really hit home. How they're a business speak these days and not about would they rescue you from a literal hell across the river Styx? Absolutely. And you know, case to case is different. There are a lot of people still out there in love. So yeah. Have I read any Faulkner? I've read As I Lay Dying, which I thought was great. Read Light in August, which like I got to halfway and then it was like I was in that Faulkner sludge. And I want to read more, but it's an extreme, despite him being such a big part of the canon and such a well-known name, and apparently, you know, one for McCarthy fans to read, it's like sitting in a sauna in the middle of a swamp in, well, you know, wherever, down south. It's just like a page is like a page is a marathon with Faulkner, and I can't really read anymore. And I know that the two I've read are the easier entry ones as well. So, and I've tried with Absalom, and I can't even remember the name of Sound and the Fury. I've tried. It's like pushing my head through taffy. I cannot do it. Which, you know, I think if you go back to something time and time again, you just can't. It's not a case of I'm going to challenge myself and push through. It's probably just something unnatural there that isn't working for you. So, you know, I'm not too. I've read two Faulkners and I thought they were great, but beyond that, I just can't do it. Could you please talk a bit about your intellectual journey from land to Catholicism, Gurdjieff, etc.? I mean, it's a long journey. I can't. Well, I could, but I don't particularly want to talk about it all. So I'll try to condense it. It might be interesting to do. I think, you know, new atheist in the early 2000s, as most young men and women were who were somewhat smart, because it was the thing to do. Christopher Hitchens and Dawkins and not Dennett actually then, etc. Sam Harris, and then, you know, you realise that doesn't fulfill anything. So, like so many other Westerners, you end up reading, oh, well, I don't really trust the West. So, you know, that sort of self-critical thing when you're young of not trying to trust the culture you're within. So then you end up, usually westernized Buddhists, Alan Watts mostly, and then you do some sort of mindfulness meditation, and then lots of reading philosophy, going through absurdism, going through nihilism. None of this is really doing anything. You stick to them all for a while, and then I think if you go through philosophy, I can't remember who said this. It might have been Bacon, but if you drink a little bit from the glass of philosophy, you end up an atheist. If you finish the glass, you end up a believer. So I think if you go far enough with philosophy, you do get to this point where you have to deal with something that could be called mysticism. So from that, and really I encountered that through the work of Nick Land. So from that, I have this realization that all that there's something going on there, right? So then I go into the typical route of like chaos magic, Franz Bardon, and then chaos magic and mucking around, pissing about sigils. And then it's like, well, I should probably find a system. So I'm going to do Franz Bardon for however long. That's probably the system I was the most thorough with. You look at Crowley for a bit, blah, blah, blah. And then, you realize you're adding, you're just compiling all these systems and this crap and all these like techniques to basically materialize what you want in the world. They work well enough, fine. But the point was to get away from that. So then Gurdjieff came along, not literally, but I found In Search of the Miraculous, which I still reread. It's one of my absolute favourite books. And Gurdjieff is probably the first mystic I met with that was more about stripping back, more about questioning, more about knowing thyself. There's one that, here's the thing, I think any real mystic, and that is someone who's, in tune with a capital T truth, they're all, because the truth can't be otherwise, all saying the same thing. But it's about finding the one that just for some reason clicks with you. I like Steiner. There's ones that I'm more warm on, like Krishnamurti I really like, but didn't find him at the time. He probably would have clicked more at the time, but I found him after Gurdjieff. But I like Steiner. I'm not huge on Crowley, but I can read them, but they just don't have that click. And Gurdjieff did. So then from Gurdjieff, I realised, well, there's other reasons for the Catholicism, but I realised that a lot of Gurdjieff students, a lot of them, did end up going to Catholicism. And I think it was the relationship with Christ through Gurdjieff, someone else has asked a question about this actually, that led me to think, well, if this is what I'm doing, then I'll go find the church. And that was the one that called out to me. I didn't do the whole intellectual thing. Some of it was intellectual, but it wasn't fully intellectual. The choice between, it was always going to be a choice between Orthodox and Catholic, but the choice didn't actually come down to tracing some little thing back and going, that's where it was historically. Catholicism was the one that just worked for a bit. And the reason that didn't work, I think, was because this is, again, it's probably speaking a bit too soon. The reason that didn't work is because the ability for a modern person to basically just pick a gestalt, just to pick around, to jump around, is quite tiresome, a bit worrisome, not really that good for you. It's a new form of consumerism. And beneath that, the whole time was, and I won't necessarily comment too much on it now, but beneath that the whole time was a niggling in the gut that just something, it's just not working. This isn't working. And dogmatic Catholics would say, well, that's not what it's about, which just doesn't work. That doesn't work for me. And what do I mean by working? I think intuitively people know when something's working. You are freer, you're lighter, you're literally, you're less tortured by suffering. You don't suffer as much. A lot of this has changed. But there's a niggling, especially in the gut, that just, by the end, it was like a literal physical sign of you should not be here. That, along with the fact that just, I hate to say it, but the sacred wasn't there. So, before you have religion and the sacred and they work together, and we're just not in that, era anymore. So the sacred just wasn't there. I'd experienced the sacred before, and it wasn't there. So moved on, and then came some other things which were spoken about, like before, which was engagement with Darren Allen's work more sincerely, via that, the engagement with Barry Long's work, and really coming down to the ground floor and all of that is for so much of this, for modern seekers, so much of the leaping next thing is like a unhappy child who the only way they can sort of feel happy is eat some new sweets, like next sweets, and you just for the whole time you're not addressing the problem. And so what, this is some advice that I've come to that I'd want to put in a piece, but I haven't really rounded it off, so this might be a bit premature. But what I've come to understand is we have what seems like a problem, and it arises, but before, and that's kind of, it's felt, right? It rises, it bubbles up, and it's felt, literally felt, physically and intuitively. It's like a knot, which I've been writing about, but I've had to move on from that as well. But it's a bit of a knot, you could say. But before we can sit with it and deal with it, you would just not believe how quickly the mind does this. The mind, the thoughts, pile a load of shit on it. So you have a problem, you have a little knot, you have this problem that's usually simple and sincere and true. And the mind is like, you don't have a problem. If you have a problem, then use this system. And then before you know it, your problem has been smothered with a system, and you're now conflating your problem with a problem within the system. So it's like, you had this problem, and now, I don't know, I've smothered it with Gurdjieff, and now my problem is I'm not self-remembering correctly. Or I had a problem, but I've smothered it with Bardon, and now I'm not doing like the elemental stuff correctly. Or I had a problem, and it's been quickly smothered by all the theology of Catholicism. If only I could read the right theological book to understand exactly what Christ meant by Mass. Then it's like, no. The problem is the fucking problem. And the problem for most people is they're not happy. And you might say, well, okay, you get down to the problem, you're not happy. That's the problem. And I would just say, I would repeat over and over and again that I wish I'd sort of, that the conclusion I've come to is the problem is the problem. Right? It's not a problem that is then fixed by a huge bloody system that then within that system you work out all the problems of it. The problem is the problem. You're unhappy, you're anxious. It's not, I'm anxious, therefore I need to. Or, I noticed that, like, the video that I've used is shining the guild of ambience. Sorry, for people who aren't watching, there's a video of trees in the background. So that you have this problem, like you have a felt bloody problem. You're depressed, you're anxious, you're not happy, you're unhappy. You're getting up and you're just going about your day, you're fine. And the thought is, and I want to emphasize that word, the thought is, if I just find the right system, and if within that system I can just figure it out, then one day it's all going to fall into place. But it isn't. It's not going to happen. And so that's my journey's been, you just come right back around to the most honest. Look, spirituality is synonymous with honesty. And you can only ever be as honest as you can be at any moment. And the first thing to be really honest about is, what is the actual problem? And for most people, it's they're unhappy. And I was deeply unhappy. And you might think, well, what the hell do you do once you realise? Because you seemingly think you need some system. And what happens, by the way, with these systems, and this is a reason I think occultists are just kind of like, well, where have you got to? Is that it's easy to get lost in a system. Look at any occult system, whether it's like one with 1,010 degrees, or Theosophy, where you have to read 1,000 lectures, or whatever it might be. Easy to get lost in these systems, but the system is a map. You just get lost in the map and conflate it for reality, and you think, if basically what you end up really doing is, if I can just work out the map correctly, then the terrain will sort itself out, which it won't. It's never going to happen. And the problem is the problem, and the problem probably is that you're unhappy. So what do? You sit with it and you feel it, because no amount of thought has ever worked. Another bloody book's not going to work. I know you all still get excited going, this is going to be the book. This is going to be the one where I finally like go outside and I'm just joyous and everything works. It's not, because you've done that 1,000 fucking times, and I have. It's not going to be the next book. So it has to be something that is de facto inherently different to the form unto which you've approached everything. Right? It's not that the book was wrong. It's not that the system was wrong. It's not that the spiritual group you joined was wrong. The leader was wrong. The whole form is incorrect. And what the other form is that isn't, you can't dualize them, is literally felt. So before your bloody thoughts come in, you just sit and you feel what that pain is that is the initial problem that led you down all these bloody avenues. And then I'm not saying don't go down these avenues, but once you've admitted honestly to that pain and you're sort of sitting with it, then you can approach these other things sort of with a genuine direction. But yeah, there you go. That was about my intellectual journey. There you go. Someone said, "Are you familiar with the work of Paul Claudel?" I'm not. Sorry to say. Jekazol. Brent Hines recently died, guitar player of Mastodon. I did see that. Very, very sad. He just got kicked out of the band. Yeah. So you mentioned Leviathan. Leviathan by Mastodon, which is a concept album for Moby Dick, is in my top 10, if not my top 5. And I would definitely say it's my most listened to album of all time. With Hearts Alive on that album being in my top 5 tracks of all time. It's an incredible album that is one of the few things that gets close to the feeling of Ahab's pure furiosity in Moby Dick. Yep. Hi James, have you watched the new movies Weapons and Eddington? I haven't watched Weapons yet. I watched, and I'll be honest about this, I watched an hour of Eddington and then turned it off because it's a movie for people that makes them feel smart, and not just that, makes them they're smart for watching it. Yeah, didn't think it was very good. I greatly enjoyed 28 Years Later, however. Still settling, but I'm probably like fairly bit of hyperbole about it still, but I do think it was genuinely great, and I think it is Danny Boyle's magnum opus. I think. Yeah. I've got some other questions from. Please keep the questions coming in the chat, but I've got some other questions from the Patreon and X.com. Someone said, "What have you got against Magnus Mills?" I thought about this one. Don't know who Magnus Mills is. No idea what this one means. Someone asked, "I would like to get into the work of Gurdjieff. How and where would one start with that? Also, do you find the teachings of Gurdjieff to be compatible with belief in Jesus Christ?" I'll start with the latter. Gurdjieff and Jesus Christ is completely compatible. In fact, one of the things Gurdjieff said was, all of this is so we can be real Christians. And what he meant by that is to be conscious, to be aware of why you're doing anything at all. And one of the earlier people to explicitly state that his work was esoteric Christianity, to be able to be sort of worthy of Christ's teaching. One person to read more on this would be Joseph Azizi, who I interviewed. But Joseph Azizi is a very traditional Catholic priest. Well, at least he seems very traditional from the masses of his that I've watched. So it is completely compatible. The Gurdjieff writer who is like most sort of emphatically Christian, like in combining it with the work, is Maurice Nicoll, whose commentaries do use Christian theology a fair bit, but his books, The New Man and The Mark especially, are really Christian theology via the lens of Gurdjieff. They're two of my favourite books. But I wouldn't advise starting there. If you want to get into the Gurdjieff work, of course, In Search of the Miraculous. But there is generally what people would say now about In Search of the Miraculous is that it's about a very specific time of the Gurdjieff work, and it progressed from that. into something far different. That was 1911, either 11 to 12 or 16 to 17, can't remember. But it's kind of a 1 year period in the Gurdjieff work through Ouspensky. So it is a must read, but also you want something from later where someone has been able to sit back. I'd recommend Kenneth Walker's A Study of Gurdjieff's Teachings. He was right with Gurdjieff right at the end, and But also I'd recommend if it gels with you, go to a group that is affiliated with the Gurdjieff Foundation. Be wary because there's a lot of guru complexes around, but with all these things, resonance is a real thing, and that's the only way I can explain it. There's a resonance that's been passed. Yeah, there you go. Do you know the band Bar Italia? No, I don't, unfortunately. Okay, another one from elsewhere. Have you reached out to Michael Della Rocca for an interview? And if not, will you do so? I believe that was to do with Spinoza. I haven't reached out to him yet. To whoever it was who asked that, I haven't reached out to him yet. Maybe in time. Also, thoughts on transcendental solipsism. If that's a movement, I'm not going to try ham-fistedly figure out what it means right now. If it's a movement or someone's written about it, I don't know anything about it. Sorry to say. Who to read post-pandemic? Well, one good essay is by Darren Allen. It's called I Remember a Pandemic, which is very good. I think a lot of the books that were written around the pandemic, especially from a lot of the popular academics, aged quicker than I've seen anything age, especially like Zizek's and stuff. Yeah, I don't know what effects the pandemic had on whoever asked this, so I can't say. Read whatever you like. I mean, just read the canon. Read the goods. Go read, I don't know, D.H. Lawrence or Melville or McCarthy or whoever. I mean, read good stuff like truth. Truth is always going to be the truth. Don't let the pandemic get too deep into your veins. It's made a few people go. Post-pandemic has made a few people go a bit weary and just kind of clinged onto it as a justified moan. And I think there's justified reasons to look at that time and kind of raise your eyebrows and say, well, what happened? What happened to a lot of people? But to get caught up on it, to not live as we are, well, no. Someone asked, what is my favourite cryptid? I don't know if this is included in the cryptids, but I would actually say Dogman. And I'm not even being coy about that because there is an interview with a man who said he saw the Dogman. He was driving and the Dogman like run beside his car. And the only reason I mentioned this one is someone sent it to me, and the actual terror in the man's voice describing this scene, I was so overwhelmed that I sort of looked into this, and it's fairly horrifying. But yeah, Dogman. Someone asks, pick any of the two questions. Well, I'll pick them both. I recently discovered a podcast, Secret History Western Schwepp, SHWEP. Do I know it? I know it, but I haven't. Again, I don't get too much time to listen to podcasts. If so, what is my opinion of it? I've heard good things. Same person has asked, we seem to hear more and more about UAP disclosure. Do you follow the topic and do you think there is an agenda behind it? Well, I've got an episode coming up, which actually we recorded and then we were going to have to re-record it because there's just so much in there, with Aaron French on UAPs. We've got an episode coming up and we're kind of covering, what we're going to try to cover is kind of the Strieber stuff, but the thing that's interesting now is because of the disclosure from the government, there's become an academic legitimization, you could say, of all of this, saying, well, okay, we kind of have to take this seriously. We have Jung's book on UFOs is now sort of, like something more to take seriously, or Greer's. And so, as a discussion, the UFO UAP discussion, this is what we're discussing, is what this looks like as it comes into the mainstream. Yeah, so whoever asked that. Someone says, I want to know what your take is on Arthur Rimbaud. Rimbaud is one of the few people below the age of 25 who wrote anything worth reading. Pretty much anyone who writes anything below that age is just not worth reading. Colin Wilson's The Outsider is the exception. I really struggle to think of anything else there. But Rimbaud is what I think. I've got the collection. It's one of the ones I'm slowly going through. I think it's great. It was put on the spot to be talk about a poet, especially, is very difficult. What do I think of the philosopher and mathematician Eric Schmidt? I know it. We messaged a couple of times, but I'm not maths brained enough to really know to figure out what's going on there. Unfortunately, if people want to ask more questions, please do so. I'm trying to think. I've got a Chiron episode coming up. I've got an episode coming up on two of these sort of very forgotten Arabian occultists. I'm going to be chatting to Todd McGowan again on Lacan. Got an episode coming up on Charles Sanders Peirce for all the language people. Just trying to think I've got another Girard where we're talking about modern contemporary myths in relation to Girard. And there's one other in there, and I'm forgetting. But that's what I got coming up. Hopefully some more on Jung. And one on Krishnamurti, Jiddu Krishnamurti. I'm trying to find a UG Krishnamurti guest. That's proving difficult. Someone just said Schopenhauer ? I think he's fine up to a point. He's fine up to a point where actually his, like most people who tiptoe around the edge of nihilism, is that the pessimism just comes to just not really make that much sense, at least explicitly. I think there's a small genre of there's a very small genre of philosophers who their writing emanates the feeling of honesty, of they are writing absolutely what they, as far as they can push themselves, with a real brutal honesty. Wittgenstein is another. Obviously Schopenhauer. I don't think Nietzsche is. Too much flowery stuff at times. If we're going right back, maybe Heraclitus. Rumi is a great poet. I have a collection of Rumi, and at one point I'd really love to sit down and read the Mathnavi by Rumi. Schopenhauer, great guy. Please keep the questions going. Otherwise, Didn't he write you also? Oh, Schopenhauer did write Jung, and I think it's all collected in an early collection. Same with, Nietzsche wrote Jung as well in Untimely Meditations. I'm not sure how young he was there, and his essay on Schopenhauer is in that. Schopenhauer the Master, I think it's called, which is quite good. Why do you think Eduard von Hartmann has been overlooked despite his massive influence on psychoanalysis and the occult? I would condense this question down to why has X been overlooked, which has really been, for the last 7 years, one of my areas of expertise is talking about overlooked people or forgotten people or underappreciated people. And what I've found is that the only correlation I've found is that as we moved into the modern secular era that became very self-assured, is that any of the thinkers whose work explicitly relied on sincere faith of not just Christian, but or even a sort of a sincere faith, but not simply Christian, just a sincere faith, fell away for a while. And that's pretty self-explanatory, because we the scientific method usurped everything. That form of new atheism from Voltaire onward usurped everything, and so that was just seen as sort of silly for a long time. So a lot of those were just overlooked because of that. That's one of the few correlations I've found. Some people like to argue that pessimists are overlooked now because they're pessimists. That people don't want to be around pessimism, right? And I think that's completely wrong. Plenty of pessimists. I think the majority of philosophy is pessimistic, even if it's like something like even utilitarianism is pessimistic between the lines, because it's clutching at something. And I think name me an actually explicitly optimistic or joyous philosopher. You're going to struggle. You're really going to struggle. You could say Nietzsche, but because of Nietzsche's sort of the strange combination of his joy with like will to power, I don't think that's the kind of thing. Again, I'm being very lazy with the East-West split. You're going to be looking at the East for this. And so, why has it been overlooked? Either it's that, because people just didn't really know what to do with mysticism, where it was a complete part of the philosophy. But as you study the history of philosophy, you realise that the list of philosophers that didn't have some relationship to mysticism in some sense, even like, you get to A.J. Ayer having his weird thing, is so short, it might as well not be said. Descartes had his like weird orbs. Pick a philosopher, they had a relationship at some point to the spiritual. And the main reason, right, because a lot of people want to throw a light conspiratorial edge onto, the history's forgotten him. Why are they overlooked when they're saying this such like unique and original work, right? People throw a little conspiratorial edge on it. And the more you study history, the more the banality of history comes through. And I think the real reason, unfortunately, so many people were overlooked and are overlooked is that in their day, wrong place, wrong time. Or maybe even right place, wrong time, wrong place, right time. Or more to the point is right person, wrong culture. Clages is a great example of that. Like, I don't think Clages would have picked on in any culture. It just so happened that he had to be he was in a culture that was a bit sympathetic and then absolutely wasn't. And most of these people have been overlooked. It just is like, they didn't really abide by that thing at the time, so they didn't get the popularity, and then their books went out of print, and just how history falls, really. Another reason, just to throw it in there, for why pessimists are overlooked is often pessimism is the philosophy that is explicit pessimism of the type of Chiron or maybe Meinlander. It's the philosophical style that is the most adjacent to poetry. So you don't always know what to do with an aphorist who clearly is engaging with philosophy, but we can't academically study this. And as we moved into academic philosophy with scholarly footnotes and cross-referencing and etc., it's very difficult to sort of deal. So many of these philosophers now. I mean, I'm thinking of Chiron, who's philosopher, aphorist, whatever you want to call him. He sort of is, in a sense, too big. And Jung might even be another example of this. Is there two people who are just their scholarly nature, their stylistic nature is just incompatible with modern forms of academic study, but they're kind of too big to fail. Like, they're now known figures. But would anyone allow someone like that to fall through the cracks now? I don't think so. If we had a philosopher who wrote in the style of Chiron or more freeform, like Jung, being sympathetic to whatever it might be now, we'd be so quick to just oust them. So there's a lack of sympathy, really. Um, Sandra said to all, I think this is lovely, it's not even a question. Sandra said, to all who are here, the greatest book is the book of life within you. Open it, search within, the treasure is within. Love to all. I can get behind that. Someone asks, do I still eat that same weird meal every day? I've gone through a lot of phases of eating the same weird meal every day, so I'm not sure what same weird meal every day you're referring to. No, at the moment I'm eating mostly like animal based, so I eat red meat, fresh veg, usually like cucumber and avocado, and then like citrusy tropical fruits with meat or chicken, fair amount of salt, and then like my dessert is often ice cream. You know, I have a fair amount of dairy, so like hard cheeses, goat cheese. Yeah, I don't eat like the main things. It's kind of like the main things I don't eat is grains, pastas now, which is unfortunate. I love pasta, but it's one of the things of getting older. Like you get to 30 and you start looking at meals thinking like, oh, I'm not going to be able to, or like tomorrow is going to be a write-off. Like you know, or I'm going to fall asleep in the next hour. Yeah. Same person asked, do I have a girlfriend / boyfriend? I don't have a girlfriend at the moment. I'm single. Certainly looking, but I mean, dating apps are both pointless, and I think it's just a horrible universal signal of like pleading. So they don't really work, and just you know, I'm tucked away in rural Norfolk, so the only people on the dating apps are, you know, my cousins. Kidding. And you know, I work from home, so we'll see if that changes in the near future. But no, single at the moment. Good evening, James. Will Evola get a look in at any point? Probably not. I've read a fair amount of Evola, and I really don't get much from him. He demands a lot of you. He demands a lot of the reader. I just think, the only defense, in his defense, his scholarship, in terms of his sources, in terms of backing things up, seems to be fine. But his immediate turn to unfathomably idiosyncratic readings rubs me the wrong way. Whether it's his book on Buddhism and saying that this should only be to do with the Aryan race, or the Aryans or whatever, or I mean, Revolt Against the Modern World. It's just this exhausting text of traditionalism that is so far removed from anything that I just don't know what to do with it. So yeah, probably not. What do I think of Gnosticism? It's such a difficult. I can't. Sorry to say, T. I can't answer that question because Gnosticism is such a prickly subject. I mean, the primary idea in Gnosticism that there is a divine spark that was snuck in, I believe, by Sophia, and that's our ability, and that, you know, I'm not big on the Gnostic or like the Neoplatonic or whatever emphasis on the world being. I don't like anything where it says this, like the reality you're in, guess what, it's bad. The only body you've got, it sucks. I really do not want to get behind that. Like God for me has become more synonymous with just life and living. So anything where it's like, forget all this, it's the thing we don't know. Like no. I really can't do that. Dangerous stuff comes from that. Have I ever tried to conjure a guardian angel like Crowley? I've conjured a few things in my time, and I haven't really got much to say about it. It's, you feel. I'll say this about conjuring things. One, it's far easier than. I'll say this about conjuring. One, it's far easier than people realize. Like way easier than people realize to do that. 2, you need to sort of strike up a good relationship, whether or not that's offering fruit or, I don't know, rum or incense or whatever. It doesn't take that long, and it's not this huge drawn out thing. The main thing for me, that with regards to like conjuring an angel, or if you're in that way inclined a demon, is that next thing you know, you're sat in your lounge or wherever it might be, or wherever you did the thing, and you're having what might be an experience. I'm not going to say this way or that. And my thoughts when I did this stuff was, one, I visualized like, well, hang on, there was this angel somewhere that suddenly was like, oh, James needs me. That's just ridiculous. Like this spiritual being that is like 3 planes above me, and I'm like, please, I just need 500 quid for a, like, I just need a new car. It's absurd. So the idea of an angel just like relaxing somewhere, and then I light some incense and say a few words, and it comes running. I mean, something came running, but the main thing that you realize from that stuff is that, and anyone, this is why I recommend that film, A Dark Song, so frequently, is that when you're put face to face with this, an experience or something that might be able to tick the box of your desire, is you suddenly go, do I really, what do I want again? Like, hang on, did I really want that new car? Like, is that really, like, I've done all this and that's really what I want? And so at most, those kind of conjurings are useful just to like have this, seriously, what do you want? I mean, you don't need to conjure it. I mean, it's a question you could put to yourself, is that if you had an angel, an archangel appear in front of you and it said, I'll give you your greatest desire, I mean, you'd probably just freeze up. You say, I don't know, sorry for bothering you, I hope you have a nice ride back. Is everything, are we cool? But yeah, like most of this stuff, same with a lot of these exercises that are like, do a sigil a day or do a thing a day, is, for instance, I mean, this is a classic one. You do sigils. A specific sigil will give you the specific thing that you've written and done, blah, 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 right? A sigil a day thing, it's like by day 6, you're like, right, well, I've asked for the car, I've asked for the new wardrobe, I've asked for the girlfriend, a nice new notepad, by... I don't know what, and then eventually, but this is the point of the exercise, is that it dissipates the desires, and you realise, like, the best thing you can do is that the first, to go back to that great quote by Picasso, it took me 20 years to paint, to learn to paint like a child again. So I think this is the spiritual journey, really, is, if you're very sincere about it, the first 10 years of it is shoveling spiritual manure on top of yourself and like trying to breathe in the best thing you can from it, but you're absolutely suffocated in shit. And then the next heart and the remaining is like, why have I piled all this crap on? Like, I need to dissipate this and exorcise everything and just reduce. And so, a summoning is an addition. So much occultism is hidden materialism, because it's all about, here's how you can have powers, or here's how you can acquire this, or get a better job, or, I mean, this is what it's about. Like, any material thing, if you want to, it's like people praying for a better car or a better house. Go get a better job. That's a material issue. And a lot of occultists and magicians and spiritual people attest to that. So material issue, material solution. Spiritual issue, spiritual solution. But they say that, but then they still conflate things and don't accept, like, material, so, yeah. I can't remember where I was. I can't remember where I was going with that. An angel, yeah, sure. I mean, angel. The etymology of angel is a message. It's messenger. It's just a message. Michel Serres writes beautifully about this. So anything can be an angel, really. Yeah. Did you ever do anything on Hermann Hesse? No, I didn't. Hesse wrote Glass Bead Game, and he wrote Siddhartha, which is like my least favourite book. So maybe like it's just a style of modernism that I just can't. I don't like Siddhartha at all. Same with on the road. I just can't do either of them. Someone said, "What dating apps have you tried?" Hinge, Hinge and Bumble and Tinder. If you must know. They're fine. I kind of just leave them be. I put them on and leave them be. I don't really want to. Here's the thing. I'm happy. Like, I'm genuinely happy now. So I'm happy in myself, and it's more. So it's more. A lot of people are looking for someone to. I mean, it's a complete cliche. This is like Uncle James's help column or something. But a lot of people are looking for someone else just to fill the void, as they say, make them whole. And if you're not whole in yourself, that's not going to work. And I wasn't for a long, long time. And so, a lot of this is like a lot of dating apps and modern dating is a clutching. And you can't really if you love something, let it go, as the saying goes. It's true. So a lot of dating is like clutching. It's like, I'm going to get that. I'm going to get this person and we're going to be fucking happy. It doesn't work. So they're there and, leave them be. And what's your approach to choosing your gym pics? Of course, bicep pics. Of course. But I have to make it look like, they're just candid in the gym. Anyway, enough about my dating life. A complete understanding of history would induce a relation of the modern paradigm and the past one. If this relation reached a fixed point, it would be a kind of retrocausal deterministic system. Man, you've said that. I don't know what that means. Sorry. Tell us your favourite synchronicity story. I got none that. I don't think I've got any that are. My main synchronicities that I always advise people on is just if I see books, like if I see an obscure book pop up named 2 or 3 times, I now buy it every time. And I would say 9 times out of 10, there's been something in that has progressed my journey a little bit more. So that's the main synchronicities for me. I don't think I've had any other like huge ones that were like life changing or anything. And then there's a line. Are the synchronicities like controlling your life, or are you is it like the fine line between spiritual seeking and psychosis? And there is a pretty clear, is your life. Gurdjieff would emphasize this, like, is your life in order? Are you a good householder? Have you got a job? Like, this is the metaphor of having a clean room. Basically, you need to have we could call it everyday hygiene. Not literal, well, literal as well, but like you need literal hygiene, you need house hygiene, you need life hygiene. You'd be doing fine in life before any of that stuff. And it is often the case that people who are very deep into occultism are kind of stinky. Like they've got like an astral funk to them, like kind of heavy to be around. And a lot of that, it's almost, again, it's like the piling stuff on top of it. Yeah. What was one of your favourite guests? Jim Newman, like recently Jim Newman. I've loved all my guests. And I do love all them guests. They gave me time. And I'm, more than grateful. Think about it a lot, actually. I'm more than grateful that they've all given me their time for free, and shared all this stuff. So all of them, really. I never want to say like one of my favourites because it kind of makes it seem like all the others were naff. But I enjoyed Jim Newman. I enjoyed the anonymous guest for the No Self. Abdul Hakim Murad was great. Darren Allen, but those are gone now, so I have to like sort of tease people. Yeah. Have I ever filled a void, as you call it? No. Well, that whole duality just disappears. Because if you think about filling a void, the void, well, you can't have something without the notion that it could fill something. You can't have like the perfect shape without the perfect whole. So this is kind of this kind of quote Heraclitus, all opposites are unity. So if you're on about there's a void in me that needs to be filled, which I felt that for, as I said earlier, I felt that for a long time. Well, if as soon as you sort of imply to yourself, I've got this void that needs to be filled, well then, it's like the notion, when you hold a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When you hold a void, everything looks like it can fucking fill it. It doesn't matter if it's McDonald's or Catholicism. If you go, right, I've got a void, bloody hell, what's going to fill it? Is it going to be Candy Kittens, or is it going to be a Wilhelm Reich book? So this is the most. If you've implied to yourself that there's a void, then the only thing you can do is then search to fill it. Of course, we've learned from writers such as Lacan or great writers on desire that it isn't filled. And so what needs to be overcome, what needs to be underlined, what needs to be looked at consciously before thought comes in is the entire dualism. Again, the entire form. To quote Barry Long, who really has changed my life, happy today, unhappy tomorrow is madness. Because they're one, they're a unity of opposites are a unity. We all say this all the time. You can't have the good without the bad, but there's something before that. There's a being before the void. The void isn't just the void doesn't exist in a void, right? That's an implication made by the mind. Stop thinking about the void. Stop trying to fill the void. Well, what was before that? And you can just be with it, and it's bliss, and it contains everything, and that is real happiness. That's real being. It contains everything, and it's a happiness paradoxically that includes sorrow, tragedy, unhappiness. It includes it all, but it's from a position of being. It's not numbing, because that's what a void. That's what shoving a Big Mac into your void does. It's the exact same thing as what shoving the next volume of Aquinas into your void does. Fills it for a bit, but then, I've read Aquinas and I really understand it, but I think maybe Duns Scotus, maybe I just please put the words in the right order and sort my life out for me. I know my wife hates me. I know my kids aren't talking to me. I know my job sucks. I know that I wake up and my jaw is clenched so bloody tight that I have headaches when I wake up. And I know I haven't crapped in 4 days. But if I just read just the right book, then maybe, actually no, definitely this time, it will all work out. Please. You know how ridiculous you all sound? And I was there. Alright, I'm starting to enjoy myself too much now. If everything is fated, then where does that leave free will? Well, this is just talking about the future. Like fate, free will, that the past leads to the present leads to the future. These are free will and fate, or free will or choice. It's all the same. It implies a form of time that is linear, and that's not what I experience. We have now with presence, and why would you think? Why would you think about free will? You got flowers got these flowers in front of you, and you've got a beautiful coffee, and you go, I wonder if this is all determined. That's absurd. It's almost grotesque. Pat a dog, the dog's beautiful, and he's looking at you with loving eyes, and you're feeling the love between you and the dog, and you go, I wonder if this love was determined. Come on. What are my least favourite types of guests? I think I don't want to hold it against them. Just academics who've yet to sort of turn the stop valve, because I understand. I'm trying to be sympathetic to them. academia has a thing of making sure your career rides on it, of making sure, oh, actually this person said this at this time, this was from this book, like footnoting, cross-referencing, making sure everything's cited. But this often means a very armoured conversation, which is, I've spoken about this so many times before, but academic conferences are, or take a thesis, you defend your thesis like you're being attacked, right? Or an academic conference is set up in that way, where there's like 3 people on a panel, and other people get their like question rifles and try to shoot them, and got ya, And I think my least favourite type of guest is an academic who's still in that form. I equally don't want the idea of like 2 bros in a podcast just chatting crap. I don't like that at all. I want the middle ground where it's rigorous, but also we just kind of let loose a little bit and not have to be so uptight about like citations and stuff. But it's this is completely understandable. Would I ever have John Custins back on? Yeah, absolutely. I've spoken to John fairly recently, and we were going to do a discussion about pedagogy actually, and education and the directions that's going. But yeah, kept up Bardon's meditations 5 years. Homeless guy living, working in a van. Poverty in meditation does eventually attract the experience of proof people desire. Once had stays in diary. Ernie. Then I don't know what to say to that, but Bardon is one. If you want to get into occultism and you want something that if you're like a stickler for systems and a bit autistic, then Bardon's system is one of the most rigorous, and it's one of the most complete. It's one thing that so many people don't mention, and it's kind of hardcore, Someone says, I'm critical of Ray Brazier's philosophy of extinction because I feel like a relational metaphysics would have extinction be vitalistic by the very negation of that vitality. My thing with Brazier is that he has that quote about nihilism is like an opportunity, right? And it's kind of a weirdly optimistic quote, and yet no one in that sphere seems remotely joyous about the nihilism or this is an opportunity. They said that, and then they skunked back into like this sort of industrial hell. So yeah, but there's maybe a couple actually, like Amy Island and Maya B. Chronic with Q accelerationism definitely took up that banner and actually went in a direction that was interesting. But a lot of the other is still kind of a certain form of misery. Hello, do you have a favourite American author? Living? Well, it's Alexander Thoreau. My nemesis. It's definitely Alexander Thoreau. Living. Dead. Cormac McCarthy. William Gaddis. John Cheever. Dennis Johnson. There's a lot. Yeah. There you go. There's a few more people in here now. Any more questions? Let me know. Any thoughts on Nick's Numogram interview? I watched some of it. I think someone has also like commented on the video, which doesn't load up in time. Oh no, it was on a different thing. Sorry. Nick's Numogram interview. I don't really like. I see there's the new CCRU book coming out, and it's not where I'm at. So the Numogram thing also isn't where I'm at. I find that, being honest, that these kind of number systems. So I've never got anywhere. I did the episode on Kabbalah, and like I can do the thing where you're like that goes to there, and I can, but it's sort of like a retroactively projective mathematics. So it's like, well, you've just made. Like, I'm not literally going up the bloody tree of life, so it doesn't. It's just too systemy. And same with the numogram. And I think anything like this gematria numogram, it's not good for you. And it's just an avoidance, I think. Yeah. So, I mean, 9 is a strange number. Do I listen to Michael Singer? People keep recommending me. So Michael Singer is the Untethered Soul, isn't it? It's like one of the most popular contemporary. I'm very, I will admit, I'm very immediately hesitant with a very popular, especially spiritual book like Power of Now. So I've read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and it's really strange to me that of all the books, that one became the most popular because it's not very well written. It's terse. It's like clumpy. And you're like, it just doesn't imbue you. An Untethered Soul is often with that. So I haven't got there yet. I'll read it. Now you've said it. They espouse a very similar view to Barry Long. Maybe. I mean, the truth is the truth, so maybe. But Barry Long, I mean, once again, I would say that if the truth is the truth, then everyone who's saying the truth is saying it in their own form. As René Guénon says about tradition, and I would say the same thing as about the truth, is that it's... the flower will always regrow, but the way it blossoms is going to be different with each season. So you're finding the flower that gets under your skin. And for me, Barry Long and Gurdjieff were the ones that got in there and really shook things up. Can I squat 200 pounds to below parallel? Let me just do the conversion because I measure things in real units. 200 pounds to kg. Yeah, I can. It's 90 kilograms. At the moment, I can squat 120. Most I ever did on squat was 140 kilos. I would usually use leg press though, because my knees are a bit gone. Yeah. So, what do I think of the band Swans? I haven't really spent that much time with them, so I can't say. Do I enjoy American Transcendentalist prose at all, or do the postmodernists reign supreme? So the Transcendentalists, I mean, I guess you're putting in that Thoreau, and then name has completely skipped me. Hang on, sorry. I got to look up the Transcendentalists now. Damn it, I need the names. That's what I was thinking, Emerson. The Transcendentalists, so Thoreau, I think for me, the better part of Thoreau was actually the early part on economy and like leaving behind society and his reasons for it. And then I don't get much out of nature writing, I never have. And I've read a lot of it. And Transcendentalists always seem to me, well, obviously, to be very close to that. But I don't get much out of nature writing because I grew up around nature. I'm close to nature, and nature's everywhere. Like, it's everywhere. So, I didn't get much about... For one of the books that I was very excited to read, but I got the least from, was Desert Solitaire by Edward Abbey. And just didn't get anything from it because I just thought, well, I'll go walk on the beach, or I'll go look at a tree. So the Transcendentalists for me are a bit like that. That the experience that they're talking about, well, I'd read it and read about an experience. And I think, well, I'll go do it. So yeah, postmodernists, I've gone off them, and I'm just going back to the classics and going back to Harold Bloom's canon. And I feel my tastes maturing, you could say. I don't think much of Pynchon anymore. David Foster Wallace is a young man's game. There's a couple of Don DeLillos I like. That era was, and I like Gaddis. That era was great, but it's overstepped its mark now, and I don't, you haven't got time. When you become an adult, you haven't really got time for many gimmicks. Yeah. When are you having Jason Giorgiani on the show? I just probably never, because I don't. People keep asking this, and I've looked, and it's strange. It's just strange to me. I don't. Yeah, not into it. I don't know any. I don't really know enough to say anything, by the way. But I don't. It's too politically adjacent. Just wanted to add that I've been an avid viewer for around 6 years, and I think your work is simply awesome. That feels good. It's my ego right there being inflated. No, thank you. Thank you. It's been a long time now. 7 years. I was thinking today that if someone got into it, like maybe at 13, which they could, I could finally have a viewer that could say to me, I've grown up with your show. Which would weird me out. I hope no one ever says that to me. Because, I've already lost my hair. I haven't got any grey hairs yet. If I do enough Reiki and breathing, I never will. But, yeah. Yeah. You say you don't really like nature writing, but you should try reading The Peregrine by J.A. Baker. I'll put it on my long list. The Crossing by McCarthy. See, McCarthy does have a lot of nature writing. Like Suttree is my favourite McCarthy and probably my favourite novel if I had to say one. And there's a lot of nature writing in that, but it isn't as literal as a lot of the nature writers. It does something more, because I think if you're just trying to speak on behalf of nature, I'll go out into nature. But if you're weaving it with something else, that's where it becomes interesting for me. Any plans of having John David Ebert on the show? Probably not. Like maybe for a Spengler talk, but I don't know. I don't know about that one, I'm afraid. Yeah. Yeah. So keep the questions coming. We're at 90 minutes. I'm gonna have a. Someone says they were 19 when they started watching the show, so I sort of feel as I've grown up with the mythics. Wow. You know how I just ask when no one to ever say that? That's nice. No, it's nice. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's nice. I mean, thank you. Thanks for, anyone listening to this as well. I'm like eternally grateful for anyone listening. I don't know, I don't know why people listen. My teachers at school, I would like to see some of them again because they repeatedly would say to me, James, being a smart ass won't pay off. And, well, look at me now. What was her name? Yeah. So, yeah. I did do the Emerson episode. No, was it Emerson? Yeah, it was Emerson. We did the Emerson episode about the biography, and that was interesting. This idea of like the full eye and stuff. But I just wouldn't pick it up. Have you read The Sound and the Fury? I mentioned earlier I've tried reading The Sound and the Fury, and I just sludge wall, southern sludge wall. What are your current views on Clages and his philosophical system? Do you incorporate any aspects of it in personal praxis? Been listening for years. Clages is really one of my favourites. And I think for me the emphasis is, and it's something I found in practice, and it's the book that I want to write, and the time for it to rise has yet to fully be here. But the body and soul, the notion and the understanding that the body and soul was split by by Geist, by the spirit, like a wedge. This comports, this equates to so many of the thinkers that have really changed my experience and how would change my life. Let's put it that way. In that, thought is nonsense. It just gets in and craps everywhere. And like I mentioned earlier, I don't know if the person who asked this question was here earlier, but like I mentioned earlier, with my nearing the end of my journey of Catholicism, I was finding that when I was walking into church, that my body was seizing up, that my stomach ached, that I felt like I was going to throw up. And I think in a way it was like walking and having the door was the wedge, and that before that the body and soul was as a unity was sort of saying, look, I don't know why you're doing something that isn't natural for this unity, that's kind of overcomplicated and that is guilt-ridden and filled with this weight that just isn't going anywhere and is getting worse, and it's like going in and having a knot just tensed up. And I've experienced this myself to a certain degree, but I've also witnessed this in so many young people who've found their way to the church, tying themselves up in knots, both mentally, but that also means physically, and their characters change into this kind of like just a tension, and it's not healthy, it's not good. And to notice that is, so that's the praxis I would notice, is that, as per the saying, and I'm not big on the book of this that's become quite popular, the body keeps the score, the body knows the score, and the body will tell you things before, and you just can ignore that. You will always find a way to ignore them. You'll pile thoughts onto them, but the body will tell you things in maybe in a stomach ache or a tension, or you wake up and you've got a headache, and the body will tell you everything you need to know. And that's Clagesian, and this is what I'm finding with Reich. Even though Reich is is a materialist, trembles a bit at the end. Didn't fully know what to do with Orgone and stuff like that. I think it became like almost a materialist mysticism for him. But for me, this is why Reich and meditation that includes connected breath work is so important, is that when you're loosening up the armour, when you're dealing with the body, and you're open, you're making way for the soul. The thoughts get in the way; they fill up the room. It's the thought is a contraction, and the body and soul as a unity is expansion. And so Reichian work and releasing armouring, as far as I'm concerned, does have a mystical element. It's just that Reich didn't know what to do with it. Someone said, how important is Gurdjieff job? I still read Gurdjieff, but once you've got the message, put down the phone. How many more Gurdjieff books are going to do it? How many more meetings are going to make you self-remember? And another thing with Gurdjieff, there's a strange emphasis. I think it comes from their middle-classness of a lot of the later students of Gurdjieff, especially Uspensky, is that you have this real emphasis from Uspensky of overcoming negative emotions. But he writes about it like, today I'm going to overcome negative emotions, today I'm not going to be angry. Like, well, calm down, mate. Same, Gurdjieff is also like this a bit. So this whole thing of overcoming the negative emotions, well, that means do nothing. That means don't react. That means non-attachment. But the way it's written about with Gurdjieff is a bit ridiculous, how can I ever, how can you actively overcome negative emotions? This doesn't make any sense. So it's still very important to me. There's still a lot of hidden stuff there, and I still read it. But it too, when you move away from it and move away from the feel of it, just ends up in this long system. And this is why I emphasise reading not just In Search of the Miraculous, because In Search of the Miraculous has a lot of the systematic Gurdjieff stuff in it. Right? It has the hydrogens, and it has all this, like the center diagrams, really systematic. And that was young Gurdjieff when he had a bit more of an intellectual bent with him then. But as you move on, he becomes the kindly old man. He becomes a bit furious later on, and more felt. And that's, you need to go to a meeting and get the resonance. Blimey. Someone's like Googling sensitive questions. What do I think about the BBC? I mean, it's just generic, like rubbish. I don't watch terrestrial TV. Like most things, I just think, well, why get a life? Do I have a view on Israel and Gaza? No, I don't. I don't have one. The only view I have is that there's a lot of people somewhere in the world. I mean, we could use Gurdjieff on this in Search of the Miraculous, actually. Who after one of his first meetings with Gurdjieff, or with a meeting with Gurdjieff, actually. Ouspensky's walking with him. It's one of my favourite moments from the book. And he says, you know, they're talking about war, and he looks at a truck filled with, and he says, it's a truck filled with crutches for limbs yet blown off. And so what are my views on it is that, unfortunately, again, it's back to forms, the very form of, and it just does sound like kind of overly comfortable, non-dual stuff, is that the very form of who are you with, which side are you on, is itself the foundation unto which all of that stuff begins. So my view is, there's a lot of people somewhere in the world, real people with lives and children and families and homes that are being blown to shit, that are being destroyed from both sides, and that the whole thing for Westerners is largely reduced into a comfortable form of media pornography, of taking up the comfortable position that makes you look like a good person once again. And maybe, you know, it's one of the long ongoing ones. There have been a lot of people, and I don't want to deny these people their work, right? There have been a lot of people that have fought for what might seem the right side for quite a while. But there have also been a massive amount of people, the large proportion of which have latched onto this as another thing that has come along to be the new porn for them to follow. And this one's lasted quite a while, but it seems everyone's forgot about Ukraine now. And then, you know, what was the thing before that? And what was the thing before that? And so there's a lot of people, very real, true people in the world being blown to shit and killed, and lives and families ruined, and horrors beyond any of our comprehension happening, with this battle being condensed into news tidbits and virtue signalling for one side that people don't want to admit. And whether or not they want to tell themselves that putting a flag up somewhere is truly helping, or a protest is truly helping, or is it just bolstering their ego? Is it just another thing in a long line of things that is the thing that will make them seem like normal, socialized people in the West? There's my not very popular view, it seems. Have you ever read any Robert Walser? So I have read Robert Walser. I read Jacob von Gunten, and I read the stories, one of the collections of stories. I read him because he's adjacent to Thomas Bernhard, and I didn't think very much of Walser, I'm afraid. Again, a form of modernism that just trudges along. Someone said, what inspired the creation of this channel? Just to give accessible information and interviews on overlooked and forgotten thinkers. Given the wide range of interests, do you ever feel like the Greek philosopher who said after all their learning they still know nothing? You know less and less. There's nothing more suspicious than an academic who, after 50 years, is still a Marxist, or still a conservative, or still a Spinozan, or still a Kantian, or whatever. It's extremely suspicious position to take. And as Brazier said in one of his rare interviews, you know, what is philosophy if not like to kind of continually move? That was to paraphrase him. I don't want to put words in his mouth. But after all this time, absolutely, the more you read, the less is there. I mean, you see I think studying Spengler is important because you see the same forms, and once you begin to see forms, you say, they're doing that, and again, it's this. Okay, so one of the pieces I would like to write recently, and this is kind of looking a gift horse in the mouth with regard to philosophy. It still interests me. I still have a deep love for it, but academic philosophy is a failure, complete failure, because the reason here's the thing. And this is the thing. You wouldn't get into philosophy if you were completely content with life. You would not begin to read Kant or Nietzsche or whoever people who you understand explicitly are asking, what's the meaning of life? What's the purpose for this? Why are we here? You know, what is a cup, right? You would not read any of that stuff if you were content. So, ergo, people who study philosophy are discontent. And I think it used to be, in the same sense that science used to be natural philosophy and had an engagement with the world. It used to be that philosophy was engaged with that side of things. It wasn't just systematic. That was there. It also had an engagement with an understanding that we're all here because we're a bit discontent and want to work things out. Academic philosophy now has ousted that out. There isn't this idea that if we truly draw Nietzsche into us or truly understand Hegel, that actually our lives will be changed. That's gone. And so this idea of, after all your learning, do you still feel nothing? The reason for that is because the way in which we're learning isn't the way in which we admit to that discontent. You can read and read and read and read and read, but if you haven't got the vulnerability to sort of if you haven't got the vulnerability to really open to it, then nothing's going to happen. The more you read, the less you the less you know. Absolutely. When did I first hear about John Michael Greer? It was I first heard about John Michael Greer via a essay. It was just on Nick Land's Xenosystems blog, where he was just recommending Arc Druid Report, and came across him there. What are some of your favourite movies of all time, and what are your favourites from the last few years? Favourite movies of all time: Harold and Maude is my favourite. Phantom Thread. I'm a big Paul Thomas Anderson fan. He's one of those directors that people like to sort of dunk on because he's like easy to, because he's really good. But he's just one of those just accept that. Just accept that he's really good. Harold and Maude, Phantom Thread, Leave No Trace, 5 Easy Pieces, Tombstone, Heat. The last few years, 28 years later again, I just really my mind goes blank. Sorry, my mind's gone blank. I'm going to end up sat here in silence. So, last few years, I couldn't say. Given your channel's focus on other philosophers' work, have you got a philosophical framework or an eschatology of your own, and do you intend to do an episode with myself? No. No, I don't think I have a framework. Not like an explicit one that I want to, like, because then it's map territory thing that you write it all out, and then people will go like, well, how does this all work, and how do I do this? My philosophy: don't make decisions, be here now. Like, do what feels right. I don't. No, I don't. From your answer about Israel Gaza, I feel like you're a fellow reader of the Daily Mail. I'm not. I don't read the Daily Mail. Again, this is the issue, because with that question, it's a very heated one. Same with the immigrants one. And the problem with these questions is that I could just avoid it. I could. But it's there, and I think it's dishonest to avoid it. And so, with that, again, I want to step back and just say, well, I'm very much of the opinion that if you believe in something, you go do something about it. So, if someone asks you a question, then you sort of have to answer it. So, yeah. Every time a form gets established, there always seems to be an exception. Exemptive examples tend to be repressed. Yeah, there's always exceptions, but then when people do that, they often, what they do is like, so when you're talking to someone about, Gurdjieff says, if someone's giving a lecture about Asia, don't ask about America. And people do that all the time, is that you'll be talking about something very specific in an essay, and they'll go, yeah, but what about? And there's so much like missing the forest for the trees, because they want to be right. they want to be a bit more about the exception. It's kind of like, well, yeah, but you miss the truth by focusing on one fact at a certain time, and it's kind of just an immature approach. All right, we're getting on for 2 hours here, so I'll do 10 more minutes, then I've got to go eat my dinner, which is a pizza, if you need to know, because I've had a few days off, so I'm enjoying eating things that, as a 30-year-old man, are edible regrets. So, any more questions, please? Oh, and there's also going to be an episode on Jean-Luc Nancy and another one on one on Baudrillard. It's going to be one on Jean-Luc Nancy and one on Baudrillard. Down the line. Thoughts on Baudrillard? I've read, it's a lot to get. So I'm reading The Intelligence of Evil, and then I've also read America. Didn't get too much from that. I've also read Symbolic Exchange and Death. Didn't get much from that. He's tough. Like you have to read a lot, I think, to get there. But yeah. So that episode's coming though. So you'll see my thoughts, I guess, or hear my thoughts. Not that I often give my thoughts in. Hermetic's plans for the next 5 years. The same. I want to try to keep up with the book reviews. I didn't do one this week because I knew I was doing the Q&A today now. But I want to keep up with... It'll be, an episode a week. And the book review, hopefully every week as well. That's what I want to try to keep up with. I'd like to start, filming the book reviews in locations, like in the woods, and give more ambient sounds, and make episodes a bit more, mellow, in a way. Like something you kind of sit with and not have this weird pressure to talk and just sit in silence for some time. Yeah, maybe I'll start doing ASMR. You're opening your wallet. You're putting your bank details into PayPal and sending me money. Yeah. Given the lack of... I'm not reading out that question. I'm a sensible man. That's all I'll say to that question. I'm new to your podcast. Would be cool to see if you could find some academics who cover contemporary philosophy from the Chinese tradition. If you email them, if you find any and email them over, then please do. Do people still message you, contact you about exiting modernity? Still a great collection, as relevant as it was when you wrote the post, I think. Yeah, occasionally I still get messages about exiting modernity. Every few years, I just feel like I want to update it. Yeah, but I still get messages about it. What advice would you give to one of your future selves that is lamenting their youth? That's a really good question now, actually, because my future self is lamenting their youth. No, that doesn't work now. My future self that's lamenting their youth. That would be the future me that's lamenting now. Which I don't know, that wouldn't work now. Do you mean, what advice would I give to my past self that's a misery guts? Have I read Confederacy of Dunces? I tried when I was younger, and I didn't get much out of it then, so I'd have to retry. The funniest book I've ever read is Suttree by McCarthy. And then Portnoy's Complaint. Michael Aguirre. I appreciate the response from Clages. He too has fundamentally changed my experience of the world. I find Clages as a direct opposer to Landian accelerationism. Yeah, I'm in agreement, but it's a tough... I intuitively agree with you, but I can't, articulate. I think you see it, and hopefully we both see the same thing there. Also, I should say this, Clages, the Geist wieder as the spirit as adversary as the soul. I have what I'm calling the Geist translation. So Clages magnum opus, which is about 1,200 pages, and was probably either never going to be translated because it's really difficult, some of the most difficult German to translate, and unfathomably long. It was either never going to be translated or translated in part. Now, I have translated via AI, and I've run this by a Clages scholar who said it's extremely literal, but great for non-German speakers. So I have it. I'm slowly formatting it to eventually we'll have an English, not scholarly translation of Clages magnum opus. If anyone wants to help with that, they can, because I haven't got enough free time to really chip away very often. Someone says you should reach out and try to interview Alexander Theroux. I have, and I gave him the questions, and he's replied. So if you go on Hermetic's Twitter and search Alexander Theroux, you'll see the failure that was my attempt at interviewing Alexander Theroux. But whatever. In an interview with Greer, you voiced an opinion of Socrates that he needs to just shut the fuck up. Thoughts on the revival of Neoplatonism? You know what? Neoplatonism. Which Neoplatonist are we talking about? Are we talking about the one that added another layer? Or another layer? Or another layer? Or another? Maybe if my theological system was more complicated, then my wife wouldn't be upset with me. Think about it. No, look, I'm being a bit coy now, but there's a limit to, like, the point of this stuff is to change your life. The point of all of this stuff, as far as I'm concerned, is to change your life, especially when it comes to religion. And so when you get this, like, here's 700 pages on, like, the, I don't know, the Neoplatonic ladder to the one. I just think, is this, you've read all the theology, but you haven't actually, you're still a misery guts. You still get annoyed when your neighbour steals your parking space. You still get frustrated in the line for coffee. I've read all of Aquinas, but I still get angry when someone cuts me off in traffic. Well, it hasn't done anything then, has it? Are Clages and Gurdjieff opposed? Compatible, incompatible? How do you reconcile both views? I couldn't gel that up right now, unfortunately. Are they? I don't think they're opposed. I mean, the thing is, Clages, maternal, enthusing, black, chthonic eros is so unique that to try compatibilize it with other things is no one's ever done it, right? So I would have to think about that. Michael Aguirre, hey James, how can I help? I will. So at the moment it's 4 Google documents. So I've formatted the first volume, and then there's 3 more to do. Where I basically just need to paragraph it up in natural places. But what I need to do is because those documents then need to be editable by people, and I don't want people who are going to go in and just muck up the document kind of thing. Not saying you will, but it's the internet after all. So it's a case of finding people who are sensible, who will go in and do that, and then I obviously would make that free. That's what I want. Last question from me. Does tech have a place in religious practice? Well, when I was in Glastonbury, so I haven't spoken about this, actually. I met Greer, in case some of you didn't see. Went down to Glastonbury with a good friend. I went with a good friend of mine from the podcast, from the server, the Discord server, which I'm in most nights, by the way. If anyone ever wants to come talk to me, you can just join the Discord. I'm in there most nights, and come have a chat. I like meeting people. But I went with a good friend of mine from the Discord. We met Greer, John Michael Greer, who was very nice. And we walked around Glastonbury with him. We went to the Springs. We went up the Tor. And we went to the Abbey. We went all around. The reason I mention this is that Greer mentioned when we were there that the way the Abbey was built initially was a spiritual technology, sort of, like built to guide the spiritual forces, at the same time guide the telluric forces, and there was a lot of that discussion. So tech's place in spirituality, in a certain sense, it's always had, like, what's the staff of the shaman, or what's it's a bit, I'm not too happy with the wording, but the altar at Mass is a spiritual technology. But if you mean tech in the modern tech sense, then a great essay on this would be by Marshall McLuhan, where he's talking about how, like, the loss of the spiritual feeling when it gets fed through the electronic wires at the Catholic Mass. So certain spiritual technologies, I mean, might seem a bit heretical, but the tabernacle is like a spiritual technology, right? So that's always been there. But modern technology, no, I don't think it really has a place. It's incredible, isn't it, that you can do so much to try mask wires and a TV in a church, but there's something about it, even though it might be made of whatever, like natural materials, they might put a wooden frame on it. There's just something about modern technology that has a feeling that just is incompatible. And for me, that was where the place of technology in the church was one of the reasons. I felt the sacred wasn't really there. That you sit down and, like, someone in front of you's got their phone out, which you can't help. Someone's got a digital watch that's beeping, and there's, like, wires all around, and there's wires pinned to the wall, and it just, it doesn't work for me. I mean, maybe I'm a snob, sacred snob, maybe. So someone's mentioned I should read Memoirs of Blas Kubaswe Machado de Assis. I don't know how that's pronounced. Yeah, I have a copy of that to read. I'll get round to it. Am I familiar with Graham Marcus? Yeah, Lipstick Traces. Lipstick Traces was recommended to me in university, and it's fantastic. Bit idiosyncratic, but it's truly a fantastic book. I mean, Michael Aguirre there on the translation of the Clages. If you just want it, I can just package it up, and it's just a massive block of text right now, and you can, anyone can have it. But it's more like I'd like something to be like, this is usable. Yeah. So, all right. Well, we're at 2 hours, but I'm in a good mood, so I'll give people a chance for any final questions. I'm getting down to my last bit of water. And then I've got to eat. And tomorrow I am at a friend's barbecue. Oh no, I'm getting too pally. I'm getting too pally with my audience. Hey guys. James here again. Seen those podcasts they have now? Have I read Heidegger? Yeah. I read, when I was doing my Masters in Continental Philosophy, one of the modules was on Heidegger. We focused on being and time, the question concerning technology, and a few of the phenomenology lectures, I believe. So I don't necessarily want to jump on the dunking on Heidegger train, but I think he was a bitter little man who, I think he was bitter at the time that the church didn't work out. And unlike Bataille, where the church didn't work out because of dryness, and Bataille then tried to transform that into a mysticism from a sort of nihilistic mysticism, that's very rough Bataillean appreciation there. Heidegger seemed to be a bit spiteful in relation to it not working out, and he then subverts the holy to a language, I've said this in a couple of the podcasts where Heidegger's come up. I think the Heideggerian death of God is the real fulfillment of what Nietzsche was on about. Heidegger is far more destructive philosophically speaking, than Nietzsche ever was. Nietzsche gets to the soul of the world, whereas Heidegger, not so much. But have I read him? I have read him, and the joke I always make about Heidegger is that he finishes he finishes, in quotation marks, Being and Time, his magnum opus, in 1912 or 16, and it's unfinished, really unfinished. He lives for another bloody 40 years. I mean, finish it. And why didn't he finish it? And that's his magnum opus, is this unfinished thing that, for me, is a dictionary of philosophical concepts. You know, Dasein is great. Being in the world is great. Authenticity. You know, these are all great concepts. But trying to weave this thing together, it doesn't work for me. The other thing that's interesting for me about Heidegger is he's so huge, such an influence, and yet you'd say, right, there's Being and Time, there's the question concerning technology, there's Basic Writings, which is like a put together compilation, and there's, well, what else is mentioned? I never see anything else mentioned. And it's fascinating to me that he's become such a influence, really, not of any book. Sure, Being and Time is his magnum opus, and it's a masterpiece if you want to consider it that. But it seems to me that Heidegger is a philosopher who's become so big off the back of 4 concepts. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just intriguing. Yeah. Might have asked, but thoughts on Colin Wilson? I think The Outsider is great, but then after that, Colin Wilson for me. So this is one of those cases where I had read a fair amount of the. So Colin Wilson then goes on to do this thing where he writes about, like, he's like a pop writer on weird or occult stuff. So he writes a book on Gurdjieff, he writes a book on Reich, you know, he writes a book on whatever it might be, like the one of the topics, right? My issue with Wilson is because I'd read a lot on Reich and because I'd read a lot on Gurdjieff before I read Wilson's books, I realised that they were pretty superficial. I think, you know, same with the Steiner book actually, and I think if you wanted almost like an occult airport read, sure, but it's frustrating that the promise of The Outsider just kind of dwindled in these later works that just kind of carelessly handled the subjects they were tackling. Someone asked again, am I still Roman Catholic? People keep asking this. No, is the answer. I've spoken about that elsewhere. Have I read E. Michael Jones? I haven't. Right. I think it's probably going to have to be it, unless in the next 10 seconds something pops up. These are always fun. And, you know, if you're thinking about supporting the podcast, please do. Patreon's very good for that, or a donation. If you have any recommendations for book reviews, send them along, but it'll be a while till I get around to them. I've got big stacks. And if you have any recommendations for episodes, topics, or guests, also email them, send them over, contact me in some way. And also, you know, the Discord is open. You can come chat. I'm in the voice chat most nights. Someone actually said that Mount Analog by René Dumal. Thoughts? There is a review of it on the channel, so you can go check that out. Yeah, but love to you all. I hope you all, you know, thank you all for supporting me and supporting the podcast. I truly am. I think about it so often, daily, how grateful I am for you all. And it's a joy, really, to see so many unknown authors and unknown guests get a little bit of deserved attention, basically. Yeah, you know, it means a lot, and it's great. And a little podcast just slowly ticking up in the world. And, yeah. We'll all make it. We're all going to make it. And be happy. Try to get down to the problem itself and not overthrow it with the system. And, you know, go, you know, we've still got some summer left. So go for a walk and listen, you know, new rule. You have to listen to the podcast on a walk. or not, because then you might miss nature. But go for a walk, go get out in nature. And if it seems like all the news and all the world is getting really bad and depressing, then ask yourself, what is the thing that's telling you that's depressing? Is it your phone? Is it a screen? Turn off the screen and be true to the situation. And the situation is exactly what is right in front of you in the present moment. So be true to that and love when you can. And yeah, thanks for listening. It's been really fun.